Shabbat Shalom and Happy New Year. I know that it's the secular New Year, but instead I'd like to talk about the Chinese New Year. I admit I don't know much about the Chinese calendar, but I recently learned that 2025 was the year of the snake. And in about a month, we will enter the year of the horse. Now, I still didn't really know what that necessarily meant, but a highly reputable search engine informed me that according to the Chinese zodiac, the year of the snake represents cunning and charisma, while the year of the horse represents honesty and freedom. Now, I've never really been one for astrology, but this year's transition from the snake to the horse is a particularly interesting one, given this week's Parsha, which features a vision involving a snake and a horse and a cry for salvation. Parashat VaYechi finds Jacob on his deathbed, 17 years after the whole family joined Joseph in Egypt. At 147 years old, Jacob gathers his sons around him to bid farewell. Hikavtzu v'shim'u b'nei Yaakov, gather and listen, sons of Jacob. V'shim'u el Yisrael avichem, and listen to Israel, your father. Jacob then proceeds to give each of his own sons a few words of personalized prophecy. Judah and Joseph and Benjamin receive praise and blessings, but many of the sons, Reuben and Shimon and Levi included, are chastised for their transgressions and their reckless behavior. And some of the fortunes are really more poetic than prophetic. It's kind of like the ancient Canaanite version of a fortune cookie. But what I find most interesting is when Jacob interrupts his own farewell address with a seemingly unrelated exclamation. It happens right after he speaks to his seventh son, Dan. In Genesis 49, verses 16 and 17, Jacob foretells that Dan will eventually govern the other tribes of Israel. And he compares Dan to a serpent on the road who bites at the heels of horses, causing them to throw their riders off behind them. And immediately after this image, in verse 18, Jacob cries out with three fear-laden words, Lishuatcha kiviti Adonai. For your salvation, I hope, Adonai. What a strange and dramatic exclamation in the middle of his own farewell address. Imagine a beloved parent in his final moments, with the curtains of consciousness closing, clarity and confusion coalescing into one departing reverie. He glimpses his son's future, the vision of a snake attacking travelers on the road, and he cries out to God for salvation. What does it all mean? Why the serpent? And why the plea for help? Our tradition offers several interpretations, and I'm just going to focus on two for all of our sakes. The first explanation seems to be our tradition's most popular interpretation. It originates in Bereshit Rabbah, which is a collection of commentaries on Genesis that dates back somewhere to 300 to 500 of the Common Era. According to this midrash, the snake in Jacob's vision of Dan is a foreshadow of Samson, you know, the one with the hair. He descended from the tribe of Dan, and he led our people in military campaigns during the era of Judges, before our people had a king. The midrash explains that Jacob foresaw how Samson defeated the Philistines, and therefore he assumed that Samson was the Messiah. But then he saw Samson die, and he became afraid. Even the Mashiach will die? And so Jacob cries out, Lishuatcha kiviti Adonai, in the face of human fallibility and mortality, I await the salvation that only the eternal divine can provide. This interpretation reinforces a classic Jewish theme, that salvation is in the hands of God, and no one person can single-handedly establish a lasting peace. But personally, the vision of the snake as Samson does not resonate. For one, I've never been much for messianism. And I'm even less persuaded by Samson as the messianic figure, given his very well-documented arrogance and impulsive violence. But my main issue with the serpent as a glorified hero is founded upon thousands of years of human evolution. Several psychological studies have examined the human fear response when seeing a snake, even just a picture of a snake on a computer screen. What they've discovered is that our fear response to snakes is faster than our fear response to most other animals. And it's faster than our brains can even consciously know the image that we've just seen. And not only that, our fear of snakes is universal across cultures, and it emerges so early in infancy that it cannot be explained by experience with or exposure to actual snakes. So it's baked into our psychology. We are hardwired to fear snakes, not to venerate them. Instead, my preferred interpretation of these verses is most clearly expressed by Rabbis Adin Steinsaltz and Ibn Ezra. Their understanding is that Jacob actually envisioned Dan as the serpent, and that the vision seemed so real that he was afraid the snake would attack him. So he begged God to save him. Lishuatcha kiviti Adonai. These three words, then, paint a powerful image of Jacob terrified of his own son. But there's a deeper significance to this interpretation, and it's hinted in the description of the serpent biting at the horse's heels. Hanoshech ikve sus. That middle word, ikve, comes from the word ekev, which shares the same root in Hebrew as Jacob's name, Yaakov. Jacob was originally named Yaakov because he was born holding on to the heel of his twin brother Esav. But even though Ekev refers to the heel of someone's foot, it also connotes a person who is conniving and deceitful. We know that Jacob's own story was characterized by deception. He tricked Esav out of a birthright, he tricked his father out of a blessing, and he was in turn tricked by Lavan to marry Leah. Only after he wrestled an angel and changed his name to Yisrael does Jacob redeem himself as a man of integrity. But in the context of Jacob's story, Ekev connotes deceit. With that specific word choice in mind, here's how I understand Jacob's vision. What Jacob sees is a potential future in which his descendants rise to power by way of the serpent, by taking advantage of others, by biting at unsuspecting heels, by coveting capital over kindness. So instead of praising Dan for being the snake, Jacob is cautioning Dan as a future leader of the Jewish people against becoming the conniving character that Jacob once was. This is one of the reasons why I resonate with this interpretation so much more than the first. It aligns with the majority of Jacob's messages to his sons. These were messages of rebuke and warning. In fact, Jacob even sets the tenor of his farewell address at the very beginning, in that verse that I read at the beginning. Hikavtzu v'shim'u b'nei Yaakov, gather and listen, sons of Jacob, v'shim'u el Yisrael avichem, listen to your Israel, your father. At first glance, this just sounds like a poetic introduction, employing parallelism to repeat the main message for emphasis. But with a closer read, we realize that he addresses his sons as B'nei Yaakov, the sons of Jacob, whereas he refers to himself as Yisrael avichem, your father Israel. This farewell address is Israel speaking to the sons of Jacob. It's the man who embodies honesty and integrity at the end of his life, afraid that his children will more closely resemble who he once was rather than who he has become. And what's more, Jacob is afraid of the snake killing him, implying that choosing the path of the snake could threaten our people's very existence. The serpent is not Samson. It is not the image of strength, nor the savior of B'nei Yisrael. It is the downfall, the backsliding of our people into the treacherous ways of those who only care for themselves. It is a Judaism infected by the venomous jaws of petty, perverse, selfish gain. It is the antithesis of what it means to be the children of Yisrael. Lishuatcha kiviti Adonai. I hope for God to save B'nei Yisrael, to rescue us from regressing to B'nei Yaakov, to deliver us from self-destruction. Now, to my chagrin, I'm not the first to have thought of this. In the words of the influential 19th century German Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, Jacob hofft nun zu Gott, doch nie Schlauheit einen Grundzug ihres Charakters werden zu lassen. Did you get all that? Rav Hirsch teaches us that by praying for God's salvation, Jacob hopes that even at times when his descendants must resort to cunning for their own survival, that deceit should never become a defining characteristic of the Jewish people. That we will control the impulse to gain and wield power by manipulation and exploitation and avoid backsliding to B'nei Yaakov. We've said goodbye to 2025. We're moving from the year of the snake to the year of the horse, and we've just laid Jacob and Genesis to rest. And in 2026, the strike of the serpent and the cry for salvation still echo in our minds. We find ourselves caught between two fears, one external and one internal. We are still reeling from the attack at Bondi Beach, only the latest tragedy in the frightening crescendo of anti-Semitism. Our people are the targets of the kind of hatred that destroys worlds. But we're not the only targets. We are marinating in a culture of deceit and injustice, of complicit apathy and reckless rage. And all the while, our leaders stoke the flames, exploiting our fears and frustrations for their own gain. We have become unrecognizable. A democratic nation once built by immigrants and a Jewish people once redeemed from slavery and xenophobia, now tearing families apart, punishing the vulnerable souls whom we were once commanded to protect, invading entire countries under the guise of democracy but for the sake of oil. We seem to be living between these two fears, of being trampled by the horse or of becoming the serpent. Will we cry to God for salvation from our enemies, or will we cry to God for salvation from ourselves? But although the snake does represent cunning and deception, we learn from the Chinese zodiac that it also represents transformation. Just as the snake sheds its skin in order to grow, we too have opportunities in life to shed our shortcomings. These opportunities often arise at moments of transition, like making a New Year's resolution, which apparently none of you do, or wrestling an angel and changing your name. Fear and deceit are the legacy of Jacob. Transformation is the legacy of Yisrael. And in the opportunity for transformation, there exists the opportunity for hope. This can be the force behind Lishuatcha kiviti Adonai. For your salvation, I hope, Adonai. In spite of the fear and the fear-mongering, I still hope. I hope to preserve the legacy of B'nei Yisrael when a hostile world would incline me toward B'nei Yaakov. I hope that by leading a life of compassion and love, by welcoming the stranger and caring for the needy, that I will help bring peace to all creation and joy to our Creator. I embrace transformation in service of salvation, and for salvation, I hope. Shabbat Shalom.